As much as I have loved machine binding all of my quilts, I have a confession to make. I officially love hand stitching the binding on the back. Let me show you really quickly how to do it in case you don't already know. First, you will need your quilt and the binding attached to the front or the back, I guess, whatever you choose. You'll want some scissors, binding clips or pins, a needle, and a needle threader if you want. I'm also using a thimble and then some coordinating thread. You will want the thread to be as close as you can get to the binding. Mine isn't perfect here, but it's fine. I don't mind. And I'll kind of show you where your stitches may show a little so that you can get an idea of how you want your thread to match. Just like machine binding, you'll want to fold the binding over onto the other side of the quilt here and cover up that previous stitch line. I did not glue base this in place. I just used clips as I went. Totally up to you how much you want to do or not do. You could also press it a little bit just to give it a nice fold over onto the other side. Then you're going to take some thread. It doesn't matter how much. I wouldn't take too much because you're going to need to pull your stitch through every time. And if you have too much thread, that kind of becomes a pain and it might become knotted. I would say maybe start with half an arm's length for your first time. Then you'll want to go ahead and thread your needle. After your needle is threaded, you'll want to make a pretty large knot at the end so that it catches and gets stuck. I made a quilter's knot. I have a separate tutorial on this, but what you do is you take one end of the thread and wrap it around your needle so there's kind of like a loop of thread. I take the end, put it on the needle and wrap it around. I did a lot of times, like maybe 8 times to make a large enough knot because I'm using pretty thin thread here. This is 50 weight Aurifil. And then once you have it wrapped around, all of those times you wrapped around the needle will make the knot. You pull that off of the needle and all the way down to the end of your thread. And if you're not catching on, just go ahead and make a large knot at the end of your thread. It's fine. There's my knot. I want it large enough so that it doesn't pull through the hole where I pull my thread in. Now, it doesn't matter where you start on the quilt. Just pick a spot and go ahead and do one little stitch above your stitch line where the binding was on the front and pull that through so that your knot sticks in place and you have now started stitching. Then I stitch like 1 or 2 times more down so that I'm below that stitch line. And then I go ahead and fold over my binding and I'm ready to start. And here I'm just cutting my tail, like I said. So now my knot is in place. And then I do like a stitch or 2 down so that I am right where I want my binding to be. Once you are all ready, now you can clip down your binding and we will start stitching it into place. Make sure when you clip it down, you're covering that stitch line. Now to begin, make a very small stitch right in the backing fabric, and it's okay if it goes through the batting, but don't go all the way through the quilt. Just a little stitch right where your binding end is going to lay, and then you take another stitch in the fold of the binding. You'll want this to be about 1/4 inch and then come out on the fold of the binding, pull your stitch through, and then make another one of those little stitches in the backing. So here I'm just grabbing a small little stitch through the backing and then just repeat this over and over again. So now I'm going in through the fold of the binding again, and you can kind of pull on it to make sure you're getting that binding fold. Pull your stitch through and then take another little small stitch right after it, right through just the backing, maybe a little batting, but not through the whole quilt. You just repeat this over and over. Once you get the hang of it, you can start going through the fold of the binding and then also grabbing a little stitch of the backing, all within the same motion, or you can just continue on doing 2 separate types of stitches the whole way. Totally up to you how you want to do it. And I kind of move my binding clips around as I go. And here I will show you how to do one where you grab both stitches at once. So I'm going in through the fold of the binding. And then when I come through the other edge, I grab a tiny little stitch of my backing as well and then pull it through. And sorry, it's hard to see, blurry, not the best quality. And then I just do the same thing over again through the fold and grab a little piece of the backing on the way out, pull it through. And if that's too crazy for you, just do the 2 separate stitches. I get it. And then you'll just do this around all the edges of your quilt. To sew down a mitered corner, you keep sewing as you had been in my previous video all the way until you get to the stitch line of where you had sewn onto the front, or this would also be like 1/4 inch from your edge on the corner there. Once you've stitched to this point, then you're going to want to go ahead and fold over your mitered corner until you're happy with it, and then you can clip it down or hold it in place. Next, you're going to take a small stitch starting at the binding where you were just stitching, go up and through the top of the binding where you're going to be going onto next after your corner. Pull that through, and then we're going to go up about halfway on the fold of our mitered corner. So just like you were going through the fold on the other edges of the binding, do that on the mitered corner, and then pull that thread up and through there. Then pull that through, and we are going to make a small stitch over back onto the other piece of binding fabric. So go over to the right and then back up on the left side again. Just a tiny stitch is fine. Just make sure you're grabbing both pieces of the binding. And then I'm going to go back through the fold of the corner and back down again to kind of the area where we started. Now that we're back down to the bottom of the binding, you can take another small stitch and just start stitching along the edge like we were before until you get to the next corner. And that is it. I'm sure there are more than a few ways to do this, but that is just how I did mine, and it's been washed and it's holding up well.